I'd love to help, but I'm wounded as you can see. I can't really bend down. I actually can't hear very well, and I think my vision's going a bit. I can't hold a sword. It's completely limp, really. I mean, it's done for. But I'm still part of this party, and I'll still carry on. I just won't do anything. I can't pass tests. No. Oh, I can't. No, rolling is just. No, it's too much. No, the hand, limp. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great Player. We are talking about self-imposed difficulties. Now, what are self-imposed difficulties, you might ask? I myself hadn't necessarily heard about them as described until very recently when someone said, hey, can you do a video on self-imposed difficulties? And I went, well, what the... Self-imposed difficulties are difficulties that the player decides to give to their character. Now, the GM might very well say, well, there's a spell, you can just go get it removed. No, but I want those scars. I want to have a twisted arm that I can't use. I need to channel Jamie Lannister / Luke Skywalker, except not with a cool cybernetic hand like Luke, just with a big metal thing like Jamie's, which is pretty useless, actually. Self-imposed difficulties are things that we add to our characters to make our characters perhaps feel a little bit more real and something along those lines. But apart from adding some interesting benefits, they can certainly add in a lot of dangers too that we have to be aware of, so that just adding in cool character abilities and failings, we need to be aware of what those are. So that's what we're going to be having a look at today, is self-imposed difficulties and how can we use them, why should we want them in the first place, what can we benefit from them, and what are the dangers that come with having those. So let's have a look at why. So why would we want to have our character's hand lopped off, or to have one eye removed, or to have a very debilitating issue? I'm not just talking about a scar or something cosmetic. I'm talking about something that literally is going to impact your stat block. So from a mechanical perspective, it doesn't matter what system you're playing, your percentile values drop, your pips drop in dexterity or in reflexes or in ability to hit or the ability to scratch with both hands, whatever. We're talking about serious issues here. So they can very much be story-based. Now, if you look at something like Luke Skywalker's hand being chopped off by Darth Vader, it comes back later on when he cuts Darth Vader's hand off later on. Spoiler alert, 1985. Spoiler alert, you need to be aware of that. So sorry about that, a bit late there. Anyway, the idea is that it was part of the narrative. I cut your hand off, you cut my hand off, we're all equal and we can become a loving family of unidextrous individuals. The idea was that it was part of the story. So yes, you can add it as part of the story to your character. Without a doubt, a dwarf who's only got one leg, the other one's a peg leg. Or perhaps it's a stone stalagmite that's been grafted onto the flesh of the dwarf at the knee. Is it going to be really mechanically useful? No. Is it going to be mechanically disadvantageous? Yes. It will reduce their swim speed. It will cause all kinds of issues with climbing. A hook as opposed to a hand. There are some advantages, but not a lot. They are usually outweighed. It can also be character building. So in the case of Jamie Lannister from the Game of Thrones series, and I suppose spoilers, but I mean we are now quite a long time from season 2 or 3 or whatever it was, when he lost his hand seemed to be very commonly lopped off for various reasons, but nonetheless, when he lost his hand, it was a character building moment. He couldn't fight anymore. He'd gone from being the greatest swordsman in all the land to suddenly just not being able to do that. So he had to go on this journey to recover that confidence that he had now lost. So it was definitely a character building moment. It was very strong, very impactful. The loss of an eye can do the same thing. Now suddenly depth perception becomes a problem, and if you're older it's not too much of a problem because your brain still remembers vaguely distances and things, but if you're young, depth perception gets become a major problem. So yes, it can be character building, absolutely. More so than just a storyline, it's now becoming to generate much more interesting character issues. And of course, it can be more realistic. If a character gets shot by a 12-gauge shotgun in the shoulder at point-blank range, the shoulder and the arm that's attached to that shoulder is most likely going to get removed. It will be shattered, ribboned, and otherwise destroyed. Now again, in most games, there will be a mechanism, not all games, but in most games, there will be a mechanism by which the character might get a mechanical arm or a replacement arm, or there is a magical power that will restore that arm. If you choose not to, it is a self-imposed difficulty, so that's what this video is about. And yes, it adds realism. Yes, there are so many times when characters preferred to keep the scars rather than lose them because story and character building, it made them remember who they are. It reminded them of the journey that they were on. Hello, you killed my father, prepare to die because I have a little scratch on my cheek. All those kinds of things then come through in this space. So a self-imposed difficulty from a narrative sense, from a story sense, has a lot of reasons why it should be there. It's a very strong, very interesting journey that one can go down in terms of one's character development. So there are some benefits. There are definitely some benefits when we look at it. There is immersion. We get the sense that the character is definitely in this space because they have this disability. They have the inability to bend at the hip, or they don't have the use of either of their arms, etc. There is definitely this immersion factor. And when you play to that immersion factor, when you play to that strength, and you have the character, their good hand has been tied behind their back, and only their missing hand is all that's left. If they try and reach for something, and the GM has given you disadvantage on your rolls, or has given you a penalty to your chance to succeed, it creates incredible immersion, and it can create incredible tension. You are not capable of doing something that someone with a complete hand would be able to do, or with both legs would be able to do, for example, or with both eyes. I mean, whatever the disability is that you choose to add on, it can create incredible tension because now this person without fingers has to now try and grasp something. They've got to try and scrape it over and try and get it towards them, and then get it into their teeth, and then try and use it becomes a very tense moment where the GM can play it up with the guards starting to arrive and all of the other player characters as they're going, come on, hurry up. And you're like, I don't have any fingers. I gotta. However it plays out, there's a huge amount of tension that can get added to the scene by having these disabilities and things that you have given your character, which makes it a lot of fun. Oftentimes it can be a lot of fun. And I think that one has to make light of the fact, not of the disability itself. Someone who has lost a limb or who's lost an eye in the real world, we don't yet have those amazing prosthetics and those amazing magical devices that just simply make it as if the arm or the eye or the half of face is simply it's replaced beautifully and seamlessly and flawlessly and without any kind of implications. People who are disabled, there are incredible amounts of pain and suffering and agony that goes along with that. So it's not to make light of that suffering. It is to make light of the situation that you have this character who is struggling and striving to overcome their limitations within the story. And sometimes that can lead to fun situations. Quite literally, if you are hanging from a cliff and you don't have any fingers and you have an itch, what are you going to do? So there are options, there are moments of fun that can come out of it, and I think in doing so it allows us to see it as the condition that it is, that it's this very difficult situation to be in, but one has to laugh. The dangers of doing this. So we've seen the benefits, now we look at the dangers. The dangers of doing this. Imposing. You are imposing your interpretation of how someone with a disability would act. So with someone without a hand, someone without a leg, someone without lungs, someone without a voice box, someone without eyes, someone without the ability to hear, someone without the ability to speak, you are imposing that upon the group. They did not ask for that. They did not ask for a character who's going to come in and be mechanically weaker than they are. So if your party, if your fellow players are about the numbers, about statistics and maths and gaming the system, where they're really looking at the gaming part of role-playing game, they're going to get frustrated because you're imposing now these features, because remember we're talking self-imposed, you're imposing penalties on your own character for no reason other than narrative. If they are there for a game, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a point of contention where they're going to get frustrated and they're going to say, but you don't have to do that. The rules do not say that you have to do that. You can do this, you can do this, you can do this, and you can overcome that. So that's point number one. Point number two is when you are doing something like this, where you're playing someone who can't see, where you're playing someone who can't hear, you must still do it in a respectful way, because there are people in the real world who simply have these issues already. My great uncle, he did not have both of his legs from the knees down. He always used to make an absolute joke of it in terms of saying, well, he can't drive home because he's legless. Legless being a phrase for being drunk in our part of the world. So he would always make fun of it, but he would make sure that he certainly, you know, he could drive himself home and do all those kinds of things. He had a modified car and his legs were workable enough. But there was a lot of pressure, there was a lot of stress, and there was a lot of strain that he was under during that as well. He could make fun of it. I don't necessarily make fun of it. I know that people go through these things. I myself can't see very well. Anyway, the idea is that you are imposing all of these things, whether it's a social imposition or just a mechanical imposition. You are putting that on the table. So make sure the table is happy with it before you do that. There is also a significant chance of derailing the plot. If your character cannot grab, cannot run, cannot see, cannot hear the plot that the GM is giving you, you are potentially derailing the plot for no reason other than a narrative of your character. If the GM needs you to overhear a conversation and your character's deaf, you can't do that. But because your character is the only one who got there, the other PCs are trapped or stuck away, or the GM is now going to have to figure out, okay, well, you can't hear it, so maybe someone wrote a note, but it is the potential of derailing. So you have to make sure that whatever it is that you are imposing upon your own character does not get to the point where the GM is constantly going, oh, it's you. No, okay, well, you can't solve the riddle because you need to stick both hands into the trap and turn them at the same time. You just can't do that, so the trap doesn't work, so you all die. Be aware of those situations and try and find workarounds. Try and look at the situation and say, okay, well, yes, this is the case. I don't have that hand, or I don't have that foot, or I don't have an elbow, so I need to have something in my backpack that will compensate for that. Think about it in those lines. That might be a bit extreme, but be aware you do run the risk of derailing the campaign, and that's the last thing that you want to do. You also then run the risk of slowing the game down. I have had this where I've had people who've played mute characters who can't talk, and they have to write everything down. And then suddenly you go, well, you guys are in a prison, you've been stripped down to your loincloths, you've got nothing to write on. So then the character has to do this mime, or they have to try and write in the sand if they can, but if it's a stone floor then they can't, then they've got to arrange bits of straw into the letters and things. It's fun the first time round, but the second and the third and the fourth time round, it just becomes too much. Now, I know this isn't a disability, but it is a way of looking at how to use these disabilities so that they are there, but at the same time, so that they don't interfere. And one of the greatest I have seen is Chewbacca. Chewbacca from Star Wars. It is not a disability that Chewbacca cannot speak English, or the common of the Republic and the Empire. Chewbacca speaks in growls and groans, as does R2-D2 for that matter. It would be considered a disability that the character cannot communicate with anybody else in that particular scene, except for Han Solo in the case of Chewbacca, and Luke and C-3PO in the case of R2-D2. So if you take Han away and it's just Chewie and he's growling and groaning and mumbling at somebody that can't understand them, that is a disability that has been imposed upon the character. And yet it was so cleverly done that by the end of it, everybody could understand Chewbacca, just mysteriously as the films kind of progressed. Suddenly everyone spoke Wookiee, and it wasn't too much of an issue. And yet the character could still use it to great effect. We still got all of the emotional turmoil and joy and angst that the character could emulate in those sounds, but it didn't get in the way and it didn't slow the game down. So be aware, if you are slowing down the game because you are hobbling along, or you're in a special floating chair that allows you to float at 20 feet around where everyone else is moving at 40 or 30 feet around. Overcome these. Be aware of them. So when we look at self-imposed difficulties, there are definitely benefits. There's definitely reasons for doing it. But there are also dangers that you need to be aware of. Make sure that you mitigate the dangers by using those benefits, and by making sure that the rest of your table are happy that you are going to be exploring something like this. And, well, quite frankly, you can't go wrong. And then you can have your character who's lost an eye, or the ability to talk, or hearing for that matter. And you can then explore it and take it further. Until next time, if you are looking for a party to join, if you're looking for a table to find space at, if you're looking for GMs who are out there running games, head on over to www.rpgtablefinder.com. Now, that's the website that we created. The Web Goblin himself coded that thing, and we put it up there for you guys to use. Quite literally, it is free to use, and you can go and find tables and players and GMs and all kinds of things. There's just thousands and thousands of people using it at the moment. Hundreds of tables being created almost every day now. So there is definitely someone out there, whether they're online or maybe in your neighborhood. Who knows? Well, you will once you go and have a look. Sign up for a free account today, and who knows? Maybe you will find a table that would be quite happily to have someone who has a self-imposed difficulty. Until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming. Now, I understand that my character's neck is healed. Now, I understand I don't have to wear the collar anymore. Now, I actually quite like it. It allows me to sleep quite nicely. See, I can sleep. I quite like that. And it allows me to subscribe to like all kinds of freebies. It's like, if you have an injury, you can get to sit in the front seat and you can walk around. It's kind of nice, actually, you know. So it's not too tight, and kind of makes my neck look thin, actually. So yeah. Oh, is that someone ringing the lunch bell? Oh, I get to go to the front of the queue when the bell is rung, because you know. Oh, I've got an injury. So if you'll excuse me, I'm just gonna go and respond to that bell. Yeah.